I know what that's like.
You do, don't you? You don't have to answer. I read your mind. That's how I knew you weren't going to use Mrs. Waller's weapon on me.
No, I wasn't.
You were going to try and talk me into fixing what I've changed. Before I die.
Yes.
I'm dying very soon.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Could you stay with me? I'm scared.
Today I want to talk about something that I haven't really talked about too much on this channel. Am I recording? I am. Okay. Whew. I've certainly talked a lot about a lot of stuff I like on this channel. And I have mentioned, at least on this channel, if not on this channel, then other channels that I like, the DC universe, DC Comics, whatever you want to say. And before I did a How I Got Into Transformers video, because a lot of the videos on this channel are based off of Transformers stuff, so I thought, hey, why don't I do that for DC too, since this channel isn't just a Transformers channel. Now, living in today's world of the year of our Lord 2019, it seems that right now that the comic war between DC and Marvel is very clearly in Marvel's side, at least from the pop culture stance, because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At the time of recording, everyone's all hyped up for Avengers Endgame. Now, by the time this video comes out, Avengers Endgame could be out already. I don't know how long it's going to take me to make this. But DC has sort of become a joke, especially with the DC movies that have been coming out lately that, with some exceptions, are not looked upon kindly. I really like the Hasbro universe, right? You know, Transformers, G.I. Joe, that stuff. But the DC universe is a real close second, and the only reason it's a close second is because I know proportionally more about the Hasbro sphere than I do the DC universe, just because there's so much DC universe stuff out there. But I really do love the DC universe. I might know more DC stuff than I do Transformers stuff, just on the fact that there's more DC stuff out there. But I really do love DC. DC Comics, the DC universe, stuff like that. So, someone watching this might be saying, Radix, what are you talking about? You like DC, you like the DC universe. What are you talking about? So, I'd like to talk about how I got into the DC universe to begin with all those years ago. Now, unlike my Transformers video, where I talked about how I got into Transformers, I don't really have a lot of clear memories. DC stuff kind of creeped into my life. It's kind of always been there. Meanwhile, I have like clear stages in when I got into Transformers. I really can't say that with DC. It's like, the Batman was always there in my life. And I think that's where we can start off with how I got into DC, starting with Batman, because I got in through Batman. There are two DC heroes people usually get into DC from. It's either Batman or it's Superman. You know, there are only two types of people in this world, the Batmans and the Supermans. And I've never been one to really be interested in anything just because, oh wow, this person can do something cool. That's sort of the appeal of Superman, that he's, one, that he's kind, I guess, but two, that he's also really powerful. And he uses all this powerful stuff to be kind. I'm more interested in, like, the, I guess the intellectual look at life. The valuing intelligence. It's hard to talk about this stuff without sounding like some sort of Victorian era dude with a monocle. The idea that the world isn't a good place and that it takes certain people to make it a better place. I don't know what I'm talking about right now. But you guys know me. You know I'm pretty much pessimistic enough. You know I'm pretty much like a goth person who just doesn't want to bother with the makeup and doesn't have the money for the fashion. You know that's closer to my aesthetic than happy-go-lucky Superman, so Batman definitely was much more appealing to me. I got to the DC universe through Batman. I always thought the fact that he didn't have powers was much more interesting than Superman, because it can be hard to write a good Superman story just because he's kind of overpowered, unless you want to rely on cliched, oh, here's another story with kryptonite in it. Meanwhile, it seems that Batman in every story is just getting beaten up and like pushed to the point of breaking, but still manages to pull on through. And that's a more appealing story to me than Superman's really powerful until he loses his powers, or until kryptonite or magic pops up, or the Flash has to run so fast, faster than he's ever run before. A lot of Flash stories go like that. But I got into the DC universe through Batman. Now, I can't remember when I first encountered Batman. Batman as an American pop cultural thing has always existed in my lifetime. It's always been there in the background. There's no definitive moment where I remember I was exposed to Batman for the first time, unlike Transformers. I think the first piece of Batman media I properly consumed, because Batman's like on advertisements everywhere. I think the first Batman thing I watched, because it wasn't a comic, would have been Batman Begins. And I do remember the first superhero movie I ever saw was Spider-Man. But Batman Begins, I guess, was my first Batman movie. And frankly, Batman Begins bored little child Radix, except I really liked the whole parts when he's Batman. Obviously, I didn't appreciate the film when I'm in my single-digit years or something. But I think that was my first exposure to Batman. Now, I did see the Adam West Batman movie at some point when I was real young, but that was boring to me too. I think I really attached to Batman we had the DVD for Season 1 of Justice League Unlimited. Batman has a lot of good moments in Justice League Unlimited.
You didn't think I'd come here without reinforcements, did you?
Wish I'd thought of that. Oh, wait. I did. Batman to all points. I could use some air support, since I can't fly. At all. Now would be good.
Around the same time I watched Justice League Unlimited, I watched the second season of The Batman. For some reason, we have a habit of buying the second season on DVD and not the first. Like, when I first watched Beast Wars, I first watched Beast Wars Season 2. It's very hard to get into Beast Wars when you've only seen Season 2 and have no context for the rest of the series. I also had Lego Batman on the Nintendo DS that I really liked, and I played the DS a lot back then, and I wanted to unlock all the characters. And so between Batman Begins, Justice League Unlimited, Season 2 of The Batman, and the Lego Batman video game, and also the Tim Burton. I watched the Tim Burton Batman movie at some point, and I remember the Tim Burton Batman movie was like the first Batman movie I watched, Little Radix watched, that I wasn't completely bored with. I really liked that Tim Burton like aesthetic to stuff. I remember it was on VHS, and it had like the whole bat symbol on the thing, and that was pretty cool. But all that stuff put together was like my foundation for the DC universe, for Batman, and for the wider DC universe. At some point, that's how I got into Superman. Watched the old Superman movie. Watched Superman Returns at some point. Superman still never appeals to... Superman has never appealed to me in the same way Batman did, but I still like Superman. There will come a time in this story where I really like Superman, but we'll get to that. Justice League Unlimited is a really good show that helped me get into the wider DC universe. There's a whole lot of characters in there, but it builds off of the previous Batman series, which I had the comic adaptation of Mask of the Phantasm, and I had Batman, Mr. Freeze, Sub-Zero on VHS. But I never actually saw the Batman the Animated Series. I never actually saw that. I still haven't seen like the whole thing to this day. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. I remember Batman Beyond coming out. I remember not caring about Batman Beyond whatsoever. It's weird because I really love the DC Animated universe. I credit the DC Animated universe to being my main source of how I got into the DC universe. But really, I only watched Justice League Unlimited Season 1 and Static Shock. Didn't really watch much of anything else. By the way, I'm bringing up this whole topic just because Justice League versus the Fatal 5 came out recently, and that's a new movie set in the DCAU. And it was pretty good. It had Jessica Cruz in it, and I love me some Jessica Cruz. But moving on, at that point, after Justice League Unlimited and stuff like that, I had my foundation for the DC Universe. I would go onto Wikipedia pages and, like, learn more about the DC Universe from there. I remember as a kid, I would write down these names of these characters and give sort of character descriptions-ish, as much as my little one-digit age could handle. I made my first Batman comic, little homemade comics that ended up growing into this huge universe called the KOALAS Mythos, which, by the way, you can read over on the KOALAS Mythos website, because it's sort of a fan fiction I started like 2004, 2005, and then it just hasn't stopped. It's expanded to include the DC, Marvel, and Hasbro universes, plus all the original stuff I've written. It's grown out of control. But you can see in my early KOALAS Mythos, it was called Cuckoo Universe back in the day, but you can see in my early KOALAS Mythos stuff how I was clearly just a kid who had a vague understanding of the DC universe, because some characters like had a name and looked like a character but acted completely different. Yeah, I read Wikipedia articles. As a kid, I read a lot of Wikipedia articles and a lot of encyclopedia articles. Like, a lot of my free time was spent reading encyclopedias, which explains a lot. Anyway, eventually I decided to get into the actual comics. Not many people make the leap from just the movies and shows to the comics. It's quite a leap to do. So I remember going to the DC Wiki and just looking up. I was keeping in touch with what was going on with the DC Universe in the comics through the DC Wiki. And the first time I clicked on it, they had this big thing talking about Blackest Night, which was a thing going on. Now, my experience with the DC Universe up until that point was, I was under the impression that comics were for kids, because I was getting into it through kids' shows, and I did not understand the non-kid stuff I watched anyway, so I couldn't tell if that wasn't necessarily meant for kids. Looking at Blackest Night was an awakening for me that, comics can be a little dark sometimes. And you know what? I liked it. I think I was about in middle school by this point in time, so middle school me liked that. Middle school me was like, yeah, it's edgy. Because all middle school me cared about was things being dark and edgy. That's all me today cares about, is it being dark and edgy. I was a Batman kid. I eventually picked up some issues of Blackest Night. For those of you who haven't read Blackest Night isn't exactly the most new reader-friendly book. Blackest Night's whole foundation is that all these characters have died throughout the DC Universe history. Also, Jeff Johns wants to have a conclusion to his Green Lantern saga that's been going on for years, that's drawing on old DC continuity. Let's combine it together and have the most, I hope you have your DC encyclopedia at the ready to read this story ever told. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea who a lot of the characters were. I was very lost, confused, but I did enjoy the Batman tie-ins for Blackest Night. Took me a while to realize that Batman was Dick Grayson in that book, which left me going, okay, what? So eventually, after Blackest Night, I said, I need to do more research. I've been spending all my free time reading encyclopedia articles on this stuff, but I need to do more research because Blackest Night was not new reader friendly. And every now and then I try to pick up a DC book. This is still middle school, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, Grant Morrison's JLA run wasn't easy for me to get into. I'm like, I love Justice League Unlimited. Let's read this. What's an Aztec? However, I sort of went through a phase of giving up on trying to understand DC comics, like the actual comics, up until reading a book I checked out from the library called Identity Crisis. And Identity Crisis is dark and edgy, but it's kind of loose with continuity, at least for the standards of continuity back then. It sort of made up events that happened in the past and referenced them. So it was more new reader friendly than anything I had read before. Identity Crisis was new reader friendly, fairly, and was dark and edgy. And I read Identity Crisis, and I'm like, hey, I like this. Which, by the way, Identity Crisis is a fiercely controversial DC book, so I know I'm going to get hate for saying I liked Identity Crisis. But it had a lot more characters I was familiar with. Its art style was easily approachable. Identity Crisis, it had a lot of plot twists, so it wasn't boring. I liked Identity Crisis. That was the door opening to me from the DC universe saying, hey, Radix, come on in, we got some comics for you. And from Identity Crisis sort of sets off a chain of events that leads into bigger stuff in the DC universe. And next thing I know, after reading some books, tried to read Infinite Crisis, that didn't go well. Tried to read Final Crisis. What was Final Crisis? Jesus Christ. But it helped me get more familiar with certain characters. Blackest Night wasn't so difficult for me anymore. And I say, hey, that character died in such and such. I started to piece things together. That continuity existed. But basically from that, I kind of stopped reading DC for a while until I decided I was going to buckle down and read as many Batman trade paperbacks as I could, starting with Batman Year One. And I read quite a bit of Batman books in the post-crisis continuity. I had learned all these different terms, post-crisis and stuff like that. And I figured out, okay, I want to read these Batman books. Read Batman Year One. Read a lot of the early Batman stuff in the timeline, like, I think Shaman took place early. Batman Snow was pretty early in the timeline. But I also read books that I really liked, like Batman The Long Halloween. Loved The Long Halloween. And eventually I started to skip some books that were in my little order I had written out, mostly because they were hard to find. But I read like Batman Death in the Family. I'm like, oh no, Jason Todd died. Eventually read Batman Under the Red Hood, or Under the Hood. I can't remember which one they used for the book. It's right in front of me. Under the Hood. Okay, the book is Under the Hood. The movie is Under the Red Hood. Good movie, by the way. Under the Hood ties into Infinite Crisis, and I'm like, oh, they dropped the nuclear bomb dude on that city. That was like what happened in Infinite Crisis. Things were starting to be pieced together for me. Read Batman Face to Face. I started to piece together these stories. Batman Hush was a book I really loved, which is also a controversial book, I believe. So I read Batman R.I.P., though I didn't understand anything of it. I didn't read Batman and Son until like 2018. I knew what happened, but I just didn't read it. So I had a solid foundation in like a lot of the Batman stuff. Then Flashpoint happens. Now keep in mind, I only have a sort of... My knowledge of the New Earth post-crisis continuity was pretty much what I had read from Wikipedia articles and the Batman books I had read in Identity Crisis. Flashpoint happens. And at this point, I'm in high school when Flashpoint happens, I believe. Because I had a science teacher that really loved The Flash. And he knew I liked comics, and we would talk about Flashpoint together. I had no idea what was going on with Flashpoint. I thought Flashpoint was a nice little alternate universe, Elseworlds type book. I'm like, oh, okay. And then the New 52 happens. Typically, DC fans look down upon the New 52. The thing is, by the time the New 52 happened, I was still just getting into DC, so I was still trying to understand this continuity. I really hadn't been attached to it yet, besides Batman. And, New 52 happens, where they reset the DC universe entirely. This is a new universe, no continuity is saved. Except when it kinda is, but that doesn't matter. Now, everyone hated this. I loved it. The New 52 was exactly what I needed where I was in my life at that point. I was a bit more familiar with the characters to get into DC, but it was just the history that I was having an issue with. So, a full reset was exactly what I needed, and I swore I wouldn't get lost this time. I would be like those people you see who had been reading DC for a long time, who had this encyclopedia-level knowledge of the entire DC universe. I was going to read everything from the New 52. Everything. Took me a long time. And there were some phases where I didn't read anything, and then some phases where I went through a huge catch-up phase. But at the end of the day, I have read every book with the New 52 on it. There are some collected versions that like director's cut and stuff like that. I have read every original story that has New 52 on it. I've read the entire 52 universe. It stops when DCU starts. People forget that there's this weird transitionary period between the New 52 and DC Rebirth called DCU. I hated the DCU because the DCU was like, we're not going to pay attention to continuity that much anymore. We're just going to do whatever we want. Which I responded to that by going, what? No, I don't like this. Which was exactly the same reaction people had when New 52 happened. Except this time I'm the one who's having everything I know being lost. Even though it wasn't really lost at all. But from reading the entire New 52, I have a very solid understanding of that era of DC Comics. I could do full-on DC lore videos on the New 52 if the New 52 had like an actual ending. The thing is, Rebirth brings back continuity stuff from the previous universe into the New 52 universe, so technically the New 52 universe is still going on. Technically the New 52 universe is still the old universe, it just has some cosmic stuff going on that changed the timeline. I did not like Rebirth when it first came out because I wasn't familiar with the universe that happened before the New 52. Eventually, Rebirth grew on me, especially as I went and back and reread more of the pre-New 52 stuff. So I like the Rebirth era and post-Rebirth era we have right now. Except for some certain books that are really bad at release schedules, in certain books that are really bad, period. Reading the entire New 52 was painful, but it made me feel a lot more confident in understanding the DC universe. And now I'm able to relate to a lot more things, put things together a lot better. And that's how I got into the DC universe. By the way, one of the best books from the New 52, Demon Knights. Nobody ever talks about Demon Knights. I might have to make a video on Demon Knights because Demon Knights is one of my favorite books of all time. I want to make a companion series to my Comics Are Weird. If you don't know, Comics Are Weird is a series I do where I make fun of comics. I want to create a companion series called Comics Are Awesome, where I review like books that I really love, that I have like fond memories of, or like there are good moments in. And there are a lot of those moments scattered throughout the New 52. So if you're a DC Universe fan, how did you get into the DC Universe? I can almost guarantee you got into the DC Universe before me, because most people seem to have done so. Although the New 52 brought in a lot of new readers. A lot of people who bash the New 52 don't really get that. A lot of people that bash the New 52 only focus on the bad. There was a lot of good in the New 52. Commander Radix really likes anything and everything that nobody likes. That should be my theme song. So how did you get into the DC Universe? Tell me in the comments below. Would you guys like to see more DC Comics related videos on this channel? Let me know about that. If you enjoy my channel, please go ahead and subscribe. It's free, please. And if you want to see me anywhere else, we have a Twitter and an Instagram. Links in the description. I'm also part of a group called the Lazy Koalas. We get together and collaborate on videos when we can be bothered. And I'm in their Discord server, it's our Discord server. Our Discord server is in the link below. You can go check that out if you're a Discord user. Which, if you're living in 2019, I know you are. I know I haven't been uploading videos lately, and that's because I've been kind of busy. There's been a lot of big changes going on in my life, and you can expect to hear another video about this within the coming months. The long story short about why things are going to be crazy in my life lately and in the coming months is I'm moving countries. 不安ばかりが先走って